Okay, Victor, we talked about you're on the phone to your card markers and your form students, and where did you get such people that wanted to help a bookmaker?
Um, I was either told about them or they came to me. It's a mixture of everything, and also the people that had contacts in stables that helped and things like that. Although I never found them reliable. I found trainers the worst tipsters of the lot. They're obviously and owners even worse. Everyone thinks they've got a star all the time.
Yeah, who were the best punters that you dealt with, and did you sort of find out at your cost, or were you told to avoid certain people and treat them with caution?
Yeah, and the professional punters you knew, and you'd be wary of them. And there were Dudley Roberts and Johnny Lights and people like that who you probably wouldn't beat over a year unless you got lucky, unless you were selective in when you laid them and laid them when you wanted to, rather than being forced into laying them. I felt no obligation of in laying any professional a bet. You treated everyone differently.
So how did that used to go down if you sort of said, "No, doesn't really suit me"?
Part of the business.
Okay, how about people that sort of appeared on the scene as if from nowhere, that looked to have a crystal ball and unbeatable, and then they lost eventually? Many of them?
There were many of those, yeah, came and went.
So how long would you give them a spin? Would you sort of get
Well,
an instinct?
you get the instinct because people have too many bets. So once people are betting handicaps and things like that, and it's. I mean, probably Bill can remember names more than I, but there was one man that came regularly with and he was called the plastic bag man, and was walking around with tens of thousands of pounds and lasted quite a long time, but the luck ran out.
So how did you I mean, you mentioned that you do decide if you wanted to lay some of the clever people. I mean, was it a mixture of, sort of cut the bets, cut the odds, follow them in, offer them a price you could earn from? I mean, was it all that?
Everything, part of it, you never knew what. And normally it was when I felt that a favourite was underpriced, and I suppose I did that because of the information I had, or the time figures I had, or when I'd drawn up my my battle plan, that I'd stick my neck out occasionally, and obviously I wasn't always right, but I survived, which is the difficult thing.
And how difficult was it not to get a rush of blood to the head on occasion?
I think you learn through experience more than anything else, not to get carried away, and feel how the day's moving. I mean, the many times that I looked at the card in the morning and thought, this is very, very dangerous, and we'll have a hard job winning today. And occasionally I put, have a treble or a fourfold, all the horses I thought could be very dangerous. Was one of the ways of ensuring, and although that doesn't always help you, because the biggest win I had through a multiple with favourites was on a day I sponsored at Ascot, the Victor Chandler Chase Day, which the bet came to six figures, high or mid six figures. Unfortunately, I put it on with the wrong person, and they couldn't pay.
So would you back in those early days, would you just go to the main meetings, or would you still go to those midweek ones that you knew weren't probably going to be much good?
I was going. It went in fits and spurts, especially if you were following customers, and I'd still go to Plumpton and Fontwell occasionally. I tried to avoid Folkestone because it was an awful place to get to, and let someone else go. But the sort of London tracks I always went to, Sandown, Kempton. As they're not gaff tracks, but they're and they have their big days, but you try and go to all those, even if they were midweek.
Okay, now we assume these days that in the halcyon days that we're talking about in the 80s, that anybody who wasn't a professional punter or a professional bookmaker could get what they liked on. Is that true?
No, not at all.
So
Not at all.
What would be the situation where you would...
Well, the pros would spread their bets anyway and have agents and commission agents and things like that, and you never knew. For example, you never knew whether money at the course was Barney Curley's or who it was. But, it's, you know, you had to have your wits about you all the time,
Yeah.
and look for connections.
Now those days, the 80s, there were so many characters in racing and bookmaking. In your book, you read Barney Curley, Jeffrey Bernard, Lulu Mendoza. I mean, do you want to tell us about a few of those sort of characters that stick in your mind?
I think it's the characters that made it in a lot of ways, and Lulu was one of those people that you know, I think someone wrote in online about him saying that it was profit through chaos. I mean, how he ever made a living, God knows. But he was always laughing. Well, there are times I've seen him very despondent, but normally always had a joke. And I'd known him since I was a child, and loved being with him and loved his stories, which were normally huge exaggerations of what had really happened. But I do remember when his hod went on, caught fire when he threw a cigar on top of the cash in the bag. And Alan Kinghorn and I were standing looking at the pitch, we were just chatting, and something caught our eye, and we saw what was happening, and there were the sort of Mendoza family tipping the money on the ground out of the bag, and all jumping on it as it was going up in flames, and it was possibly one of the most hilarious moments I ever had at a racecourse. But that was typical of Luna. There won't be many more like him. It's the same with Jackie Cohen, who was normally drunk by the second race, but still managed to make a book all his life. And I can remember as a very young man going to Brighton Greyhounds, and I parked up in my Mini, and this was just prior to my father dying, actually. And my father had a dog running at Brighton. Jackie Cohen drove up beside me in his Bentley, fell out of the driver's seat, and the car started to roll down the hill. The car park was on an incline, and I managed to, he'd left the door open, so I managed to jump in the car and put the brake on. And he didn't know who I was, that I knew, realised that I knew who he was, having seen him betting on the board. I managed to put the brake on, and he said, "Come here, super boy," and he said, "Here's 20 quid," which was quite a lot of money in those days, and I'll buy you a drink as soon as we get inside. And I introduced myself, and we were fond of each other till the end.
Okay, the one we've mentioned already was Barney, and there's a video clip online of him wandering down the rails and backing a horse to win 25 grand with you, and I believe it's Bill Ty Clark in.
Yes.
I mean, what would you do with bets like that?
It depends, because a lot of the business I did with Barney was done over the phone in the morning. Barney would, to my mind, rarely have a big bet on something while he was at the racecourse that he was taking serious. Now, Barney got bored sometimes at the races. He'd have done all his business or told someone to do the business for him. And those were throwaway bets for Barney when he wanted to... he wanted to be entertained in a race, but they weren't the serious, where he got his serious money from. he was too clever for that.
Okay, now you took on also some big Australian punters, Kerry Packer and Alan Bond.
Yeah, two different animals. Kerry Packer turned up at Brighton races after playing polo at Cowdray Park, I think. It was and was tipped, I think, opened an account with us there and then, and then proceeded to back about 3 winners, having been tipped up by Mickey Fletcher, who was a bookmaker come punter, also called the Asparagus Kid. I think he first arrived at the racecourse selling asparagus in the Midlands. That's where he got his nickname. It took me quite a bit of time to forgive Mickey for that, but and it was very, very expensive. But Alan Bond was something else. He arrived at Royal Ascot one day, full of it, when he was, at the peak of his career, when he had, won the America's Cup and all that sort of thing. He started betting with me. I checked him out by phoning a friend at Aspinall's casino who vouched for him, and he lost an awful lot of money in the first 3 days. And one evening I was in a restaurant during those 3 days, and I had the table next door to him. I was entertaining a few customers and a few friends, and he was with a whole group of people. He left earlier than us and said goodnight. When I went to pay the bill, he'd paid the bill, which I thought was very sad, having, taking into account that I really should have paid his bill. Anyway, the week carried on, but on the last day, he started to bet with Heathorns, and he backed 3 or 4 winners. And I saw him later in the day on the Friday, and I said to him, "Why did you stop betting with me?" He said, "Oh, you were unlucky. I had to have a change." And he said, "I've changed my luck and I've backed a load of winners. So nice to meet you." I never saw him again. That was just one Ascot. That was.
So somebody like that, who I assume was betting in sums over and above the majority of your, but would that go in? Would you be making a book, or would he just go as a separate entity?
What we call top of the book, yes. He'd have to go top of the book. And we'd play lots of customers that we just, if a customer arrives at the races and they're going to have, a bet every race, it's rather a different thing to facing up to someone who's going to be selective, and you'll see once in a blue moon. Those are the ones you had to be careful of.
But would you still be sort of trying to make books otherwise?
Yeah, you'd have a separate book, so you'd be. Which you'd be looking at as trying to make a book. Being on the rails is not a case of you don't have the chance of really making a book. You're not going to lay every runner in a handicap. Far from it. I mean, you're going to lay the front few and like the other horse. Any big prize horses are either someone shrewd or an owner that believes in his horse.